There's two lives we live. One is the life we live before we realize we have one. And so part of the awakening is like that this is a very small moment in time and it goes by like this. And any of us who have lost loved ones know that like it is not guaranteed to us. Like we we could go tomorrow, we could go tonight, like we really don't know. And anyone on their deathbed will tell you that they wish they lived better, that and there are some that say they really lived well and that's what they're harboring on at that stage, but we sleep through it. We're sleepwalking, and that's why awakening is the right term that you use, because we want to awaken to what this is and why we're here and not be passive, right? Because that leads to dissatisfaction and us waking up at 60, 70, 80 and being like, what did I just do my whole life? I just followed this automatic program that society told me was the way to live a life.
Welcome to SoulPod, where science meets mysticism and your inner wisdom leads the way. I'm your guide, Crystal Cassidy, and together we will bridge the seen and the unseen, science and spirituality, the practical and the profound. From quantum physics to energy centers, near-death experiences to extraterrestrial contact, join us as we delve into the mysteries of consciousness and journey together towards a more awakened, compassionate, and soul-connected world. Find your seat, drop in, and let's go on a journey together. Welcome back, light beings, to another episode of Soul Podcast. Very excited for our guest today. And before we get into that conversation, a few reminders here. If you're getting a lot of value out of Soul Podcast and Soul Pod, please like and subscribe. That helps us grow and reach more people with this message of awakening and how important it is for our world right now. Also, we have a retreat coming up in April in Joshua Tree. We have a few spots left for that. So if you want to join us out in the desert and go deeper into your spiritual journey, we'll be doing breath work, night meditations out under the stars, connecting with higher dimensional consciousness and connecting with each other, pushing your meditation practice a little bit further than maybe you're currently comfortable with in a very powerful, profound way. So if you want to know more, you can always reach out. You can find us on soulpodapp.com. And I am so excited to be in conversation today with a dear friend. And she's Mandy Hamilton, a published psychology researcher and transformational coach who blends science, somatics, and ancient wisdom with roots in behavior change research, professional athletics, leadership in tech and venture capital, and extensive training across NLP, breathwork, sound healing, and shamanism. She brings a truly multimodal approach to healing. Mandy's work helps people feel deeply at home in their mind, body, and spirit. Welcome to the podcast, Mandy. So honored to have you here today.
Thank you. So good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I love your background. We have a lot in common with like the athletics and the scientific research. And we also have a lot in common when it comes to the healing journey. So I would love to start there. We've both been on really deep, challenging healing journeys. And I tend to find that this is a commonality amongst spiritual people, especially in leadership positions, that we all kind of are put through this portal of transformation and healing. And so I'd love to hear from you. How has healing and your spiritual awakening kind of gone hand in hand?
Yeah, thanks for that. I feel like I hope this is really relatable for our listeners in that I was sick for 5 years. So I do have big T childhood trauma. So there's been a lot of healing on that. But this was a whole nother animal in that I actually had a spiritual awakening. And then, so I was the most alive, most myself, most like the most accessing of my own truth and spirituality, and everything was kind of technicolored for a while, and then a few months later started to fall ill physically. And this illness, I'm sure, started long before that awakening day. I had had mold exposure in the Bay Area here. I also grew up in
Mm.
Hawaii, so I'm sure there could have been mold in my environment. What that toxin does, I mean, I remember I was living in Sausalito, in California, and I was, not abundant at that time and saw mold on the walls of some apartment I was living in. And I was like, oh, like I had no idea it was bad for you. Of course, it's not ideal, but I wasn't realizing that I was risking my health. So yeah, so went through what I would call medical mystery for 5 years, not knowing what was wrong, knowing I was very tired and very clouded. It felt like a cloak was over me,
Mm.
and like I was kind of moving through quicksand and mud. Um, and interestingly, I had a vision in a plant medicine ceremony while I was sick. I was with ayahuasca in Peru, and I saw this like energy had come in and opened a back door for other energies to come in. And then later found that like mold creates co-infections with things like candida is another thing that gut
Yeah.
parasites. So when our system gets weakened, like your liver and your digestive process, what I found is it started to weaken everything. And so I got all these other things going on, like digestive issues. And so I had quite a few symptoms and finally found functional medicine, which I'm just like the biggest proponent of.
Me too. Yeah. The
Gosh,
way
I just
medicine
want
should be.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And so finding functional medicine doctors that knew what they were doing was life-changing because it's the cross section. So just people who that's a new term for. It's a cross section between a classic MD, they can prescribe all of those Western things. They're often Western trained with a functional lean. And then naturopathic medicine, obviously, and what they look at is a functional system. Anyone who could guess are all of our parts in our body speak to each other. And like I said, when mold came in, everything got out of balance. And then I became prone to parasites and candida. And so then when you go in and you start to treat the system, then the system starts to function again. So now it's like, oh my God, my skin, my inflammation, my digestion, it's like a second rebirth. It's literally a second spiritual awakening. Because I don't know who on the podcast could also relate to this, but definitely recovering type A person, don't at all identify that way now. But I'm sure some of this was all that pushing and achieving and, just depleting my adrenals and all the things we do because we think that's what we're supposed to do. And so now on the other side of that, it's been about a year of just like feeling really great again. Thank the universe. It's another awakening in and of itself, right? Because like to be in that drudgery and not know how you're going to get out, and it really links to personal empowerment and to trust and to faith and to detective work. And so that builds a lot of like self-trust in me. Like, okay, I was in like the throes of something that was very confusing, and Western medicine, Kaiser just told me I had chronic fatigue syndrome and there was nothing I could do. At the time I was 32 and like couldn't walk around the block more, or
Mm.
couldn't do more than walk around the block for like months. I was like bedridden pretty much. And I was like, there's nothing we can do to help you. So I agree with you. I've seen a lot of my friends who are like very bright light workers, very much in the awakening arena. Somehow I would liken it to an initiation or
Hmm.
uh, something maybe we're more prone to. Yeah, I'm wondering what if any of this parallels your own health journey. But yeah, it felt like another initiation to build deeper resiliency and also like way deeper care. So now I don't overschedule myself. I don't deplete myself. I
Hmm.
don't tap out my adrenals. It's like I really pushed before, and now I'm learning, the slow life movement where I still achieve a lot and care a lot, but I just do everything different now.
I love that. And it does parallel my journey in so many ways. And it's so interesting that it's around the same age too. Like 28 to 32-ish. I got mono in my 20s, like kind of late. And that just completely rewired my system. And probably I already had some things going on that were probably out of balance that made that even worse. And then COVID making it, life and death experience. Yeah, it's so confusing. It's really discombobulating. And for type A's like us, or at least we were, that pushing part, especially for the feminine, living so outside of kind of who it is that you are, because that's how we've been conditioned to operate. And that's what it means to get things done. And there's like a whole different way. What I learned through that process is there's a whole different way to get things done.
Mhm.
And that's
Mhm.
through surrendering. That's through the being part of it. But it takes some time to navigate that and to put the sails back up of the boat of life so that you're like catching the right winds again. And
Mhm.
I think for me at least, it really taught me that the analytical mind can only take you so far. That the like trying to figure it out, the Western medicine, the acute approach to our bodies is limited. And so when that fails, what is there left? There has to be something. I always felt like there's something else going on here. There's some other opportunity. And that's when I was like, the surrender part of it, the allowing myself to be in my body in a whole new way. It like opened up to me in a whole new way. And now
Mhm.
I used to be a bit of a hypochondriac too. I don't know if you had that experience as well, but that has totally dissolved since then, which you would think it wouldn't because it was such an intense experience. And yes, there was trauma from going through some of that intensity that I had to work through. But the result was I trust my body so much more. It's so much more powerful and intelligent than I had previously given it credit for. And that's been a new relationship with my body and a new relationship with what it means to do and be productive.
Mhm.
It's like rest is productive. Like it's so important. And spiritual work and the meditation, the time you spend with yourself is productive. It's the most productive, actually, I would argue.
Mhm. I agree with that.
Yeah. So I wonder what else for you during all of that tumult and intensity. And I'm so glad that you're on the other side of it too, because I know it can be so frustrating for people who are in it. You constantly have this thought of like, is this it? Is this now my life?
Yeah.
Where do I go from here? How do I maintain hope in the face of this? So how did you come through that? Because I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to is I don't know what to do when I'm in the middle of the storm.
Yeah. I love that question because it relates so much to the same with the deep T, little t, and big T trauma. What do
Mm,
you do when your body or your emotional state, your automatic programming is not at all what you know in your heart is how you want to experience life or how you want to behave? So, I started therapy when I was 13 years old, and I
wow.
remember being depressed in clinically depressed in high school and suicidal, already on antidepressants at that time. And I remember journaling was like the way I got through it plus therapy. And I remember saying like, I don't know how I'm going to get to this future destination, but I'm
Yeah.
going that way. And that has always been the thing that has kept me moving, kept me going.
Mm,
Just this vision and almost this gnosis, like I love that word, this knowing deep in my being that like that over there is where I'm headed and I don't need to know how. Like letting go of not needing to know how and moving in that direction and just being experimental almost like, okay, this friend just talked about this thing. And then, later that week, another friend would talk about the same thing. And then I would just listen. I'm like, okay, the universe is triangulating some clues for me or suggesting I experiment with something. And of course, we need to do that sustainably and not just be grabbing at every little thing, but it has worked for me.
right. Yeah.
So I've just kind of been like, okay, I'm a detective, I'm a scientist, I'm an experimenter, and I'm just going to move through life trying the best modalities that come across my life. And that's kind of shaped how I've healed. And then now the work I do, why I have so many different trainings, because I've gotten trained in most of the things that have worked for me. And so I really believe in this multimodality experience and that we can just like find these golden nuggets from again modern science and then also ancient technologies. I was just in Peru for 2 weeks, 3 weeks for my third time working with Indigenous elders there. And that is some ancient technology. And is that better or different than, ozone therapy here in the US, which is, for more the mold and parasites and things? Just depends what you're working on. But the fact that I, as an individual, am so privileged to have access to the
Yeah.
science and the anecdotal evidence from other people of these different tools is what makes this moment, being alive as a human in this moment, one of the most amazing blessings in, again, our privilege bubble. There are definitely people living in oppression,
Yeah.
but we are very lucky if we are free in that regard.
We're so, so lucky.
Mhm.
And there's so many things you said there that I think are important to double click on. One of them is that you mentioned that you kind of knew where you were going. You didn't know how you were going to get there. And I think that's so important to call out because was exactly my experience too. I was like, at some point, once I had come out of the kind of acute intensity, I knew I was gonna be okay, and I knew I wasn't going to be debilitated by this, even though it took years, like you said. So, very similar. It's interesting that we have that in common. Like, I knew I was going to recover, and I knew I was going to be even more healthy than I'd been in the past. That was like my intention, was this vitality to return tenfold. And again, I didn't know how. I didn't know how I was going to get there. And some days were easier than others. But, and some people would come to me with certain things and be like, oh, because of this, you're probably going to experience this for the rest of your life. Like, I think I shared on the pod that I've had an abnormal heart rhythm for most of my life. And sometimes, stress and whatnot can make heart palpitations come around, and it can be very scary and all that stuff. But I went to the doctor a couple weeks ago and they're like, you don't have that abnormal heart rhythm anymore. And I was like, well, I thought I was supposed to have this for the rest of my life. And then I was like, oh, my intention was to be even more healed, to be even more vital. And I don't know how that happened, but I like to think that it has something to do with healing at a very, very deep level, and that things that we think are not possible are then possible. So knowing where you want to go is such an important thing, because a lot of times we don't take the time to really sit with. This is why meditation is such a cornerstone practice for me, and think about that. Where am I intending to go? Where do I want to be? How do I want to feel? And if you can get more clear on that, I mean, I think it's the first step of many, but it's probably the biggest one. And you've mentioned,
Absolutely.
yeah, you've mentioned all of these different modalities that you've been trained in and exposed to, which I think is, you have such a unique perspective because of all that exposure. I'm curious, with all of that exploration that you've done, which modalities or experiences for you right now kind of ring out as being, I'm hesitant to say the most powerful, but the most applicable for these times.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this very question and answer because of the detectiveness and like where do I vote my time, both in like my personal life and in my professional life. And I do believe that psychedelics are a huge pathway into a lot of what we're talking about: empowerment, healing, clarity, awakening. And I think I've been thinking about it as like a room of doors, and like we're those of us who feel the call to ascend and move forward and awaken and to support the world who needs it so much, that we're in this room of doors and we can pick, meditation is our door, or, sport, or these breath work, yoga. They're definitely doors to the same room on the other side. It's just pathways that really connect to us, right? Or
Mm.
you could liken it to, for a lot of people that I've seen go through psychedelic experiences, it's once they have one of those experiences, whether it's, a classic psychedelic like mushrooms or, LSD or ayahuasca, one of the more classic, it opens their awareness to then be able to access again without the use of psychedelics. So a
Right.
lot of people I know, that I've worked with that have gone through that process, they then, oh, now I can meditate. Like I get where I'm going.
Right.
Like we went to a Joe Dispenza retreat this summer, and it did really feel like that. It's like, oh, what he's doing here is reinforcing a lot of that. I like to call it enhanced states of consciousness. So you open your consciousness, you open pathways that maybe have been dormant your whole life and even your whole bloodline. And then you access this state. And then when you're in a context like a meditation retreat, whether it's, soul pods or some, on the app, and then you're like, oh, I'm here again. I'm here in this
Mm,
place. So it's,
yeah.
and I've deeply dedicated to the word practice because I think in our society, we want like exactly the best tool and the thing that solves the thing. And
To hit the mountaintop.
yeah, exactly. A cheap check. It's like personal health. Fitness is not a check mark and you're done. Like we are living, breathing, dynamic organisms, multi-dimensional ones at that. And we do spend our time day to day. And so how do you want to spend your time? Probably practicing the things and the tools that make you resilient, that make you inspired and able to access awe. We're in a crisis of inspiration. People are
Mm.
lost in this society because they
Ooh,
don't
I
know
got chills.
where
Yeah.
to plug in. And vital, radiant, vital, feeling actually in their own bodies and feeling good in their bodies with vitality and connected as the last one, right? Feeling connected to others, connected to self, connected. We're in a crisis of connection, just like we're in a crisis of inspiration. And so, yeah, I would say that cluster of psychedelics, breath work, somatics, like in the body, in the movement of energy and in the access. And then lesser known things. I think when I was thinking a lot about your audience and my fellow people on this path, having practices where we clear our energy and come back to center is like a step two of what I just, so step one is like those practices that just ground and orient. And then as you're moving through the world as a more alivened and sensitive person, then it's really having practices as you interact with a chaotic world that ground you and that clear energy that's not yours. So having, I can start listing some if we want, but that spiritual and emotional hygiene to me just
Hmm.
feels so tremendously important in these times.
Yeah, I want to get into that for sure. I want to loop back on what something you said here and I was like, "Ooh, that very much resonates." This crisis of inspiration. I think that's such a powerful framing and I totally agree. And we're all desperately looking for that inspiration. You can feel it in people. Why do you think we're in this crisis of inspiration?
Yeah, I mean, so multifactorial, but like the first thing that came to my mind is our devices,
Mhm.
right? Like we're and then the second thing, which is much more meta, but is like this domestication, right? Where we're not only are we attention economy, right, on our phones, but we are also so isolated in the way we've domesticated ourselves. So we're in our individual houses. Many people are now working from home. You're getting your groceries delivered. Like, where is that human interaction and like not just sitting at a device, so even our leisure time is now like more device driven and more passive, and we're not
Mhm.
like not taught to be out in the world. And like I love traveling Latin America in particular because I feel like there's even more street murals and art and bright colors. Like we forget that life can be a celebration and that life is truly a gift, and because there's just not a lively outlet. The
Mm.
other place that makes me feel this is the depot in Mill Valley. From a structural standpoint in the US, Europe has this. They have town squares and there's like these epicenters that you can go and drink coffee or tea, and you can just feel the heartbeat of fellow humanity, and people are sitting and chatting and kids are playing, and that's what I feel when I'm at the depot. It's like one of my favorite places in the Bay Area because it's got that.
That
There's park
liveliness.
benches and picnics and live music, and we must get off our phones and off of our laptops and like be in the world, like finding beauty. So this
Hmm.
is one of my favorite quotes of all time that I think so links to this. And it's actually from Parangi. And he was interviewed on Aubrey Marcus's podcast. And he was like, it is not beauty that is, or it's not love that is the fabric of the universe. It is beauty. Beauty is the fabric, and love is the witnessing of that beauty.
Mm, beautiful.
And so we really want to get back to the place where we're in awe again, where we feel connected in our bodies to the beauty of nature, of spaces, with capitalism and profit as the number one driving mechanism of this country. We lose human first, society first, pleasure, right? Like,
Yeah.
why aren't we designing for human centric spaces? Right? It's
Yeah.
like, oh, we'll do what's affordable or cheap, or instead of like, let's put more plants here just because it's
Just
beautiful,
because it's beautiful. Yeah.
just because it'd be more enjoyable to be here, right? Like, that's not the design thinking that is
Mm,
creating the spaces that we are interacting with when we're not in our homes.
yeah. And you can see
So
that in the evolution of architecture over the last couple hundred years, everything for efficiency more so than what is it delightful to look at and live in. I was in it spent some time in Europe this past year and I'm like, how did we lost so much when it comes to architecture. But I
I love the
also
word
think,
delight. I want to double
yeah,
click on that, right? So it's like wonder, delight,
delight.
like optimizing even in the way we eat. I've guided my
Mm,
partner in that direction. Like, he will sometimes just kind of eat standing fast, moving from thing to thing. I'm like, let's turn this into an experience. Let's dine at a table and like have nice dishware and just like savor this moment.
yeah.
There's so much opportunity to delight and to savor, and we miss it because we're so busy. But like, what are we so busy doing, right? It's like on to the next thing, on to the next thing. And it totally links to
Forgetting.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're totally
Yeah.
forgetting
I
why we're even here.
Why are we here? I mean, that's such a powerful question. And the other question being, who am I? And to
Mhm.
really sit with that. And I think awe is such a powerful experience of consciousness. It's like this bigness. It's the overview effect when astronauts go to space and look back on the planet and you're like, holy shit, I forgot. I forgot that this is reality. This is us. There's so much here that we kind of get stuck into our patterns, our habits and day to day and life being that. And it's so important to break yourself out of that, if not every day in some sort of practice, to do it often, to do retreats. That's why retreats, I think, are so powerful, is to get you out of
Mhm.
what you know so you can kind of shake up some of that and be like, wait a second, there's the trees, there's this beauty. And even in that stillness, I think one of the reasons we've lost some of that inspiration is because we've forgotten as a species who it is we really are. That we are these interdimensional, infinite beings that are hanging out on a planet for a period of time, very short. And we've forgotten that. And when you start to remember that, and that's really the process of awakening and empowerment, you start to inspire yourself instead of like looking out to the world to be like, who's going to inspire me? Who's going to lead me? I think there's a lot of us asking to be led. And it's like, it's in you. Like, you're your inspiration. You just got to dial in and hear it and remember who you are. So I love that call out of there being a crisis of inspiration. That's really it's inspiring.
It's a wake up, isn't it? And that's
It
like the
is,
process
yeah.
of awakening is like, I'll never forget a few years ago, one of my clients was like, he heard this quote and he was like, there's two lives we live. One is the life we live before we realize we have one. And so part of the awakening is like that this is a very small, like small moment in time and it goes by like this. And any of us who have lost loved ones know that like it is not guaranteed to us. Like we could go tomorrow, we could go tonight, like we really don't know. And anyone on their deathbed will tell you that they wish they lived better, that and there are some that say they really lived well and that's what they're harboring on at that stage, but we sleep through it. We're sleepwalking, and that's why awakening is the right term that you use. because we want to awaken to what this is and why we're here and not be passive, right? Because that leads to dissatisfaction and us waking up, at 60, 70, 80, and being like, what did I just do my whole life? I just followed this automatic program that society told me was the way to live a life.
Yeah. The number one thing, connections, family, friendships, and wishing they had just done the thing. That's really what people say. That's for all of us to remember that it doesn't come down to, one of my teachers talks about the kind of levels and evolution of souls. And it's that first level of soul, which is really the soul is infinite, but the experience on the planet might be newer experience. And so there's a lot of naivety that comes into that experience. There's a lot of confusion when you're that kind of embryonic incarnation. And then you move into this more fetal state. You're growing, you're taking in a lot of nutrients and a lot of things. And this is where we still haven't awakened yet to who it is that we are. And so the ego is just so activated. It thinks that the accumulation and hierarchy is what's the best use of time and energy. And then you start having the natal experience. You're going through the birth canal and it's intense. There's a compression, there's a lot of pressure. And we go through all these kind of different stages within our own lifetimes too, but there's kind of foundational levels as well. And then you birth out into the awakening and you're like, whoa, what just happened? I didn't know the rest of this was possible. That's that moment where you really transition into being a seeker and you can't get enough. And I know you and I have both had this where you're like, okay, I want to learn all the things that this is the teacher that's the right teacher for me. But those early phases, even the healing journey, we could liken to that natal experience, that birth canal experience where the pressures are so immense that you're having to just kind of get through it and trust the process and allow the pressures to birth you into a new experience. But that embryonic fetal stage, that's this really challenging space that so many of us on the planet are in right now, and understandably, and we've all been at some point in our incarnations and in this lifetime. And so that accumulation, that hierarchy, this is really capitalism. It's capitalism being a very fetal stage of consciousness. And hopefully the natal isn't too long and intense, but I think we're heading into it, or we are in it.
Totally. And I mean, this rebirth, one of my passions is ceremonial work and ceremonies, and how we don't ritualize our lives anymore. And that, because a lot of people aren't actively in religious practices because they don't like, it doesn't connect for them, they don't relate. And with that, like, we don't have that much ritual or ceremony about death and rebirth in our lives. And
Yeah.
if you're on a path of growth and awakening and seeking, you will have many deaths and rebirths in your life. If
Yes.
you're in a romantic long-term relationship, you will have many deaths and rebirths within that relationship. And we don't normalize that and we don't ritualize that. And I think we
And
really
a lot of
miss
times
something.
we shame it. We're like, there's something wrong with you if you're going through this birth and this death and rebirth. And that's part of the satanama of it, that death, rebirth, infinity. That's the cycle of life in the universe. So yeah, I love that you call that out.
Yeah, you're right. Like shame or like something's wrong.
Yeah.
No, 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 no. This is literally how we create alchemy, right? This is how we put parts together and they
Yeah.
they reconfigure and we create something new. And if you do it in the right way, it's always for something better. Like would I wish my childhood on other people? No, not really. Would I wish my health journey on people? No, not really. But when I look back, I kind of laugh at the universe because I'm like, well, clearly they knew or I knew that this was going to be useful because I see the gifts. I see all the gifts because I alchemized, because I ritualized, because I metabolized. And some people never get the gift of doing that process because that's not what we're taught to do. And you
Mm-hmm.
just stay in the samsara of suffering. You
Mm-hmm.
just keep recreating the same
The
template
wheel. Yeah.
over and over again versus knowing that like that hurt, that trauma, that, offense actually, when metabolized, allows us to ascend even higher. Like that is its actual spiritual purpose, but we're not taught how to do that. Right. And why
Mm,
it's so important to work with other people and professionals to do that, because back to not knowing how, you don't need to know how. You just need to know you need some support or you
yeah.
need to know that that's where you want to go and find someone who knows how to go there. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a good point. We've lost the ritualization of life. And that was a big reason why I was so passionate about SoulPod coming forward, because I'm like, how could we in a really accessible way bring ritual back into people's lives? And however you want to kind of build that for yourself with the breath, the mantra, the contemplation, the expansion, the self-guided muscle, also developing that. But it's so important, and whatever calls to you as being really following your intuition, working with guides like yourself that can take you into a really safe, powerful opportunity for expansion. And we all have this infinite onion of spirit and soul and incarnation, and not even past lives, but simultaneous lives across space and time, that we're much more dynamic than we think we are. And so because of that, this work that you're doing and that we're doing it's so, like you said, multifaceted. It's so interdimensional. And that means that there's always dots connecting that you could not have anticipated. And I think that's why it's so powerful that you have that background with trauma, big T, little t trauma, to really help people who also have those experiences, to create a container that's really powerful. So I love that that's a part of your work now.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, just that Soul Pod really does that as well. In that, like, again, we've peppered in this term empowerment and that like the beauty when we have, breath work, meditation, these different tools on an app platform is like we're in a moment of crisis or stress, or we want to just have a daily practice. It's here back to this being the most amazing time to be alive. Like you can architect how you feel or direct yourself when you're not feeling that great to these tools so that you do practice feeling better and awakening. I mean, what a gift. And guess what? You're the director of your movie. So you just have to choose that and create space for it and prioritize it. And while that can be
Yeah.
hard, because the discipline is also not something that is super cultivated in our society, but once you build that muscle, it permeates everything, right? And
So worth it. Yeah.
so worth it. It's everything. And like you
Yeah.
said, meditation in the morning, priming our state, right? Priming how we feel is then the foundation of how the rest of our day goes. You don't get it till you get it. You don't get it till you
Yeah.
do it and you
Totally.
experience it. So that's an invitation to anyone who's like, I haven't experienced that yet. Like, dedicate, right? Do those 21-day
Yeah.
journeys, because then you will start to click and see how these practices then infiltrate everything in a good way. Yeah.
Yeah, you're so right. You don't know till you know. Just like with the psychedelics, you don't know until you enter that space, that liminal space, that highly entangled space, and you're like, "Ooh, this is possible." And same thing with meditation. Once, and especially if psychedelics have kind of opened you to, or any other kind of practice has opened you to that possibility, you now know that it's not just that that's possible, but there's likely quite a bit more expansion behind that that is also possible. It's such a, I think it's the ultimate exploration, the ultimate journey for a human. And like you said, even though it is very chaotic out there, I do believe still that we are living during a very exciting time for us, for the species. There's so much possibility, especially if more of us awaken. So it's a very potent time.
Yeah, so that's the macro to the micro, right? Individually, we have
Yeah.
these deaths and rebirths, and I think of it as fractal theory, right? There's these little things that we experience in the micro, and in the macro, that's also true. And yeah, so many people feel so defeated by this moment, and I completely get it. It's heartbreaking to see some of the
Yeah.
things happening in our country alone. But this is the ground of revolution. This is where things change. Like, this is the material before the death and the rebirth. So if you can see it a little more zoomed out and feel empowered in it, what is yours to do, then it's like, oh, wow. I often say, it's kind of out now that aliens do exist and they've come, right? Like, if you read the government released files, they're very transparent that they've released that, like, yeah, there's some other beings. So I often say they're coming to Earth because it's the best seat in the galaxy. Like, it is the most interesting planet to watch. Like, what is going to happen with Earth? Like, it is a collective experiment. Like, and what is going to happen? What are we going to choose collectively? Like, when is it going to be more important to build society for humans than to build society for profit? When is that going to happen?
Ooh, yeah. Chills. I got chills on that. I'm very connected, I think to the ETs and the interdimensionals. I got a wave of energy when you said that. So definitely confirmation. They are around. And yeah, I think the news has been spilt there, and it's just kind of getting everybody up to speed on, okay, what does it look like to have, what does it feel like to not be the most advanced species in the universe? And I think that it's really funny. I was watching a new documentary that's out, and it's also mostly all men, which is interesting, in military. And there's so much kind of fear around national security and ensuring that the power dynamics are upheld. And I'm like, ooh, that's going to turn all of that on its head, because there's so much further advanced than us that's just not an option. And so we're really having to have like I guess it's humbling in some ways as a species, but it can be extremely empowering as a species of like, ooh, this is what's possible, and how not alone we are, and how beautiful it can be to be in relationship with species who have figured out a lot from their own evolution. And there's so much more, I'm sure, that we'll learn. But I love that you mentioned that. Shout out to the we'll talk more about that. But I would I would love to ask you about energetic hygiene, and this may kind of bleed into the conversation around forgiveness and sovereignty and power, and how those are kind of all related.
Yeah. Yeah. And the hygiene thing makes so much sense, right? Because then, so the liking it to, like, we wash our bodies and, like, we're on board that we need to clean ourselves. And so and this is something that is a fact. You can use specific readers and you can see your auric field, and it goes beyond your own body. This is not a
Mhm.
woo thing. I really like science. It's one of my passions. And so there are readers where we can literally see our energetic field that extends about 2 feet around our body. And I also am trained in psychology, and there's a concept in psychology called transference. So you're mingling energies with, a client, and there can be a transference of energies because emotions are so powerful and so strong. And then similarly, we can go around the world in our days and we are interacting with people that we're not even intending to in grocery stores or work, or, and some of them are intentional interactions that are just stressful, right? Like a boss that's
Mm.
challenging, a partner that's challenging, and things on the news. And so we're more sensitive than we give ourselves credit, especially if we're on this path of growth. It's because I wanted to use this word earlier, with high levels of attunement and
Mm.
aperture. So I believe that as you awaken, the aperture gets bigger and bigger, and you take more and more in. So this attunement makes us more sensitive as well. And so when I work with, I've worked with over 1,000 people at this point in my work, and that's a lot of interaction in a very intimate way. And so this what I've noticed sometimes when I do like a deeply healing process with someone is I almost like, because there's a things humans do called rapport. So we match and mirror. If you walk into a room and everyone's energy, you can feel it, is high and everyone's excited, you yourself will feel uplifted. But
Yeah.
you walk into like a church or a funeral and you feel everyone's energy, then you match and mirror that, because that's part of our tribal nature. We match and mirror to be part of the tribe to survive. So that still happens where we're very susceptible to energy. So in all that intermingling that we do and that I've experienced, I will sometimes notice that rapport where like after this session, like I'll spend a whole day with someone, I'm like, oh, I'm kind of thinking the way they think, or I'm thinking about the same themes, or like my emotional body is still kind of in that because it was matching that. And so then there's a great tool from an energy worker here in the Bay Area I learned from, and I'm sure it's universal, but you just sit with yourself and you go mine, not mine. So you track it, you go into your body
Mm,
and you're just kind of scanning it, mental body, emotional body, physical body, spiritual, and you just kind of notice if something's not yours, if something feels foreign, like it could be objective, it could be a color, it could be an emotion, it could be an energy, and you just humbly and gently like push things out as you find your own center. So I love that one. I will often do that when I go to sleep after working with people, mine, not mine,
yeah.
and just pushing things out. And so that one's really cool because you can tap into these subtle energetic layers that maybe you're not doing on a regular basis. Can sometimes show up in meditation this way, right? Where you're like, huh, my third, I'm meditating and I'm focusing on my third eye and it feels different than usual, right? Like you can start to notice that in meditation. And then one of the most amazing tools that I know is actually this legal medicine called combo. And it is not for the faint of
Yeah.
heart, but it is a very powerful frog um, secretion that goes into the skin, and it's a prerogative, so it makes you purge, so it's quite intense. But why it's so amazing is it's legal, and it has all these bioactive peptides. So peptides are these like, new golden thing in medicine. I believe peptides are going to completely revolutionize medicine, and they go into your body and boost a lot of the helpful biological functions, right?
Mm,
And so it has a lot of physical health benefits, but also this emotional clearing. The prerogative is really like, I don't need this anymore, and releasing things. So it's a very powerful detox spiritually, emotionally, physically. And so I wanted to bring that one up just because it's less of the known.
yeah.
And then just two more that I think would be really interesting for listeners is salt. So whether it's the ocean, salt bath, foot soak in salt, salt scrub. Salt is incredibly ionizing. And so it's a very powerful purifier and frequency attuner. And so it's like one of the best things we can do is go to salt bath is really the best, but we can do, a cold plunge in the ocean or a warm
I
plunge
love
in the
it.
ocean.
Yeah.
And then working with smudge or tobacco. And so smudge is, a lot of people know this, the sage, but with intention, that like I'm
Yeah.
clearing anything that's not mine. And the biggest thing we can say to ourselves every day is, I am sovereign. I'm sovereign.
Mm.
I'm sovereign. So like I do that each day. I try to do in the morning, but I don't. And that means like I am independent, but sovereign is like I stand on my own feet, but I don't see it as like I'm alone. It's like I am my own
Yeah, I
being.
think
And
I think people get confused on sovereignty.
mhm,
Yeah, it's your queen, it's your king kind of authority, it's your power, it's your we are in an individualized partly experience. How do you think about sovereignty? Because it's not saying that we're alone, to your point. And it's not saying we're disconnected, because we are connected. But it's kind of a reclamation of your energy. Is that how you think
yeah,
of it?
I think
Yeah.
of it as a reclamation of your own power. And back to what we've been talking earlier with empowerment, it's agency. Like I am
Mm,
personally this is like the tool for your own freedom is like, and it links to forgiveness, which is like a perfect theme, is like, yes, there are things that have been done to me that have been out of my control, but I am personally responsible for how I act, how I think, what shows up in my life to the best of my ability. And that is a reclamation of your own sovereignty and power. That, like, yes, I couldn't control that thing, but it is now for me to choose how I show up in my interactions in my life. And it can be a little like frustrating because you're like, but I didn't choose to have that
right.
abusive mother. I didn't choose, and I'm feeling the legacy impacts like of that thing or that event or that person. But it's everything because that is no longer happening ideally, and you are in your own energy and you are able to architect, are able to have agency, you're empowered to create what you want. And yes, that's not easily done without some healing if it was a very challenging thing. But that's the healing, as we linked to earlier, is actually where the death rebirth comes and more gifts. So it's a really bizarre design of
The
this reality.
paradox. Yeah.
Yeah, where it's like you got to go through the adversity to then come out the other side even better. But again, we're not taught that this in everyday life, like, oh, yeah, you got challenged. Like, you're going to have such a great rebirth. This is going to lead to such incredible alchemy on the other side. But it is the truth. It is what
Right.
happens when we really process something all the way through. That is our opportunity. And I'm not saying
Yeah.
it's easy. Like, again, I say this as someone who has big T
Ooh.
trauma,
Yeah.
but I do say it's absolutely worth it. And it's going to suck either way. This is what I say to clients. It's going to suck either way. You keep, you know, unresolved trauma, you're just moving through life, or you have to like effort to heal the trauma. But one path leads to it not sucking as much or at all anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so powerful. And that's the power of choice and how you move through this life. That agency, that power, reclaiming your sovereignty, your ability to create. You are a creator. And that's like a shift. And again, to your point, and not saying it's easy, but that shift from what can end up being a frequency of victimhood into and churning that, alchemizing that, acknowledging the truth of the experience and alchemizing it into something that is powerful for your journey. And remembering that you're so much more powerful than any of us are trained or taught that we are. I love that. Is there anything else that you feel called that you want to share with the audience today before we move into our lightning round?
Yeah, let's do it. So I wanted to share something that I feel is really valuable for this time of year. So this will be in January, right? We're in
Yeah,
the
new
new
year.
year.
Yep.
And you and I talked about this going into the podcast. And I was like, I think this is part of the distortion of this reality that you're supposed to all of a sudden have all this pressure on you that's like new year, new resolutions, face yourself, reflect on last year when you're in the dead of winter, which is like the
Yeah.
most hibernated, like not right time, not biologically right time to do this. There's no renewal energy in the mid of, in December and January. It is darkness. It is hibernation. And like where this idea came from and you and I were like, whoa, yeah. And I love to observe Persian New Year or just that spring energy. Like I still reflect in January and all that stuff, but I really do my like closing of the chapter of the previous year in the springtime when I'm starting to feel revival and renewal because it's sunnier and there's spring flowers blooming. And I just really wanted to invite everyone to do that and to not put any pressure and to not feel like,
Mm,
God, what did I do in 2025?
totally. Yeah.
It's not the right time. Like, let yourself have a few more months of the transition. Like, maybe that's a great reframe. Like, from January to springtime is a transitionary time into the new
Yeah.
year. And it's really once you start to feel that newness in yourself that you can do those reflections and set those intentions because the energy is supporting you, not fighting against you.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes to all of that. It's always blown my mind. I think this is why January is such a difficult month for everyone because you're being, to your point, being forced into these themes that are not aligned with the time and the energetics. And of course there's different hemispheres, and this is also why I think we can't apply like global kind of expectations when the regional experience is so much different. If some area of the world is in the dead of winter, that should be treated differently than another area of the world that's like in the blossoming. They're in their spring, they're in their summer. And yeah, there seems to be such an opportunity there for like regionalized ritual, right? Like ritual is all about aligning you with the energetics of, in the case of a day, with the energetics of that day, with the morning. I don't take meetings anymore until the sun is fully up. I used to take meetings way too early, and now I don't. And I close my day when the sun sets, no matter what time that is. It shifts throughout the year. So in winter, that's coming earlier and earlier and earlier. It's a challenge for an entrepreneur. I'm not going to lie. There's days where I'm like, I really need to get through some emails, and I could work till 8 or 9 p.m. But I find that if I start to live outside of those rhythms, those rituals, that it starts to catch up with me every single time. And I have to, for me, and for you, Mandy, like walking that walk, it's so powerful to be authentically in that rhythm. And it is a challenge, though. I rub up against that all the time when somebody's like, hey, can you meet late into the evening, and you want to take that meeting, you got to figure out what's more important.
Mm,
And it's not everybody's working in that way. And so I think that's part of what leadership is setting those new norms and to start to
mhm.
slowly kind of move us into, okay, maybe January isn't your go month. Maybe January, to your point, is a transition month. It's reflective. It's slow. It's restful. It's
Mhm.
listening. It's still. Like that's what January feels like to me. So thank you so much for that reminder for the community.
Yeah. Thank you for that hemisphere thing. Something I don't think of that much because I don't have loved ones in another hemisphere. But yes, gosh, that
Yeah.
even adds another layer of this like global world of complexity.
Yeah, yeah, it's wild. Our lightning round. So my first question to you is, what is one belief that you had that you no longer have?
Yeah. Then this is so relevant to a lot of us. I experienced a lot of verbal abuse as a child, and I was told I was worthless for years of my childhood. I, no surprise, internalized that when I was, in my teens and my 20s. And I remember the self love journey was like alien, something so foreign, so
Yeah.
out of my realm. I'm like, to love yourself? Like, what is that? Like, I couldn't even wrap my head around the term.
Yeah.
And, now I work with people in that position, and I can't even imagine not loving yourself. I can't imagine hating yourself or having an inner critic. Like, I just don't have even that voice in my head anymore. And, sometimes it's a little like, why did that happen? Oh, I wish that didn't happen, but it's not. And it is a belief that, like, of my own and all of our inherent worthiness, right?
Mm,
Like, that got replaced with like, of course we're all valuable and worthy, and we don't need to do anything to be worthy, and that has, of course, shifted my entire experience of other people and what is valuable and who is valuable. It's been the most amazing homecoming I could ever ask for. And one of the bridges, just anyone else on that journey, was self-acceptance was the first thing
mm.
for me because I was self-love was not approachable. I was like glazed over eyes. But
Yeah,
when I
totally
when I
understand that. Yeah.
when I heard self-acceptance, I was like, okay, so that gives me something to do. I have to work to accept myself as I am and everything I've done and everything I've not done. And that is the work. Okay, that's clear and hard, but clear.
Yeah.
So hope that's helpful.
I love that. Start with self-acceptance.
Yeah.
It's a hard journey. That it sounds simple to love oneself, but sitting with that, I've seen it so many times.
Mhm.
And saying to yourself, I love you. And noticing anything that comes up in response to that is powerful work. Thank you for journeying with us today, Light Being. We hope you enjoyed the episode. And before you go, we want to invite you to explore the SoulPod app, where you can immerse yourself in daily lessons, guided meditations, and breath work to develop a soul nourishing daily ritual and tune back into your own inner guidance system. You can download SoulPod in the App Store or directly from the show notes to start your free trial today and awaken the ancient wisdom within you.